The executives at Stratton Core used to joke that mergers weren't built in boardrooms, they were built in backrooms, during late-night calls and whispered promises no one dared to put in writing. But on the night the $6 billion merger of the decade was about to be finalized, I learned something far more brutal. Sometimes mergers are killed by ego. And mine was strangled by the man who had smiled in my face, shaken my hand, and fired me an hour before the deal was to be announced. I didn't just lose a promotion. I didn't just lose credit. I lost the chance to reshape an entire industry. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that he had just given me the perfect motive, and the perfect opening, to pull the thread that would unravel his entire empire. I had spent 3 years building the architecture for Stratton Core's merger with Highland Dynamics, a fusion that would have created the single largest logistics intelligence network on the East Coast. I knew every contract clause, every algorithmic advantage, every weakness the regulatory board could exploit. And more importantly, I knew that CEO Russell Dane was hiding 3 of those weaknesses under a stack of falsified compliance reports. He assumed no one else knew. He assumed I wouldn't dare reveal it. After all, what disgruntled ex-employee would risk burning down the very company they helped build? But in the moment he marched into my office with 2 security guards and a termination envelope printed an hour earlier, something in me snapped into perfect, calculated clarity. If he wanted to destroy my future, I would simply return the courtesy. Russell always thought he was the smartest man in the room. His mistake was forgetting who actually wrote the room. The merger depended on stability, transparency, and legal cleanliness, 3 things Russell had violated with such arrogance it was practically begging to be exposed. And he had picked the worst possible day to betray me. Highland's board was still meeting off-site, waiting for my green light. Without my verification, the final sign-off couldn't happen. Russell assumed he could bring me back as a consultant the moment Highland demanded a final audit. He assumed I'd be desperate for relevance, desperate for approval, desperate to stay tied to the deal I birthed. But the second my ID badge hit the security bin, I realized something beautiful. I was free. And free people are dangerous. I sat in my car for a long time after the firing, watching employees tap badges I no longer had access to, watching Russell step into the elevator that had carried me to endless late-night strategy meetings, watching the building absorb him the way a snake swallows an egg, calmly, methodically, and inevitably. The skyline shimmered behind the glass, my skyline, my work, my contributions, but beneath the glitter, something darker simmered. I knew Highland's CEO, Nora Helston, respected me. I knew she trusted my instincts. And I knew that if I made one call, just one, she would pause the merger long enough to crack open the shell Russell had painted over his violations. But pausing the deal wasn't enough. I wanted truth. Not vindictiveness. Not petty sabotage. Truth. Because the truth was worse than revenge, Russell would destroy himself with it. So I drove. Not home. Not to a bar. Not to a lawyer. I drove to the one person who could weaponize everything I knew without it ever pointing back to me, a federal compliance officer whose silence I had purchased years ago, not with money, but with loyalty in a favor he still owed me. "Tell me everything," he said as I opened the folder I had sworn I would never use. "I want you to sink the merger," I replied. "But I want you to do it legally." His eyes widened. "You realize what this will do to Stratton Core?" "Yes," I said. "And I know exactly what it will do to Russell Dane." And the wheels began to turn. The compliance officer, Marcus Hale, flipped through the documents as though they were radioactive. Every page he touched tightened his jaw a little more. Eventually he closed the folder with 2 fingers, like he was afraid the lies inside it would stain him. "Russell hid all of this from the board?" he asked quietly. "No," I corrected. "He hid it from everyone. Even his COO only saw the polished reports." Marcus exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. You know this isn't a quiet takedown. If these violations go public, Stratton Core stock will collapse. The merger won't just fail, it'll implode. I nodded. That's exactly why you're the only name I trust with this. He studied me for a long moment. You don't look angry. I'm not, I said. I'm done being angry. There is a particular kind of calm that a betrayed man can achieve, a clarity that comes when rage burns out and leaves only purpose behind. Marcus saw it, recognized it, and didn't question it again. He slid the folder into his briefcase like a loaded weapon. Once I submit these findings, he said, there's no reversing it. I know. And when this hits the regulatory board, it will reach Highland in under an hour. I'm counting on it. Marcus hesitated before he spoke again. You're aware Russell will blame you. I allowed myself a faint, humorless smile. Oh, I'm counting on that too. By the next morning, the air in the city felt charged. My phone buzzed at 8:14 a.m., an unknown number. Is it true? Nora Helston's voice cracked like a whip the moment I answered. Russell falsified their compliance preparation? He told me you signed off on the infrastructure review. A quiet satisfaction unfurled in my chest. I never signed off, I said. I was fired before I could. There was a sharp inhale on her end. He fired you? Before the merger? He knew I wouldn't approve the documents, I said evenly. So he removed me. And hoped you wouldn't notice the missing signature. Nora's silence was cold and dangerous. She had the controlled fury of a woman who built an empire by dissecting arrogance like a surgeon. You're coming to my office, she said at last. Now. She didn't ask. She commanded. Highland Dynamics headquarters was built like a fortress of glass and steel, its exterior sharp and unapologetic, much like Nora herself. When I entered her boardroom, she was already pacing, her leadership team clustered behind her like storm clouds. She gestured at the massive digital display, where the compliance violations Marcus had reported were glowing in damning red text. This, she said, is a corporate death sentence. I nodded. And Russell knew it. Her eyes were ice. If this had gone through, if we had merged with a company hiding structural fraud, I would have lost half my board, billions in capital, and my reputation. Her voice dropped, slow and lethal. He tried to hang me with your rope. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Nora leaned forward, hands on the table. Tell me what you want. It wasn't a question. I took a breath, slow, deliberate. I want my name cleared. I want the truth on record. And I want nothing more to do with Stratton Core. She nodded once. Done. But she wasn't finished. And I want Russell Dane. When she said it, the room shifted. Executives exchanged glances. Phones buzzed as news alerts trickled in. Stratton Core stock was dropping like a stone. I raised a slow eyebrow. What do you mean, you want him? Nora smiled a quiet, dangerous smile. Stratton Core will be vulnerable, she said. Crippled. Bleeding out. And I intend to acquire it at its lowest value. I froze. She wasn't just killing the merger. She was planning to swallow the entire company. And when I do, she added, I'll need someone who understands the infrastructure better than anyone. Someone who built the architecture from the ground up. My heartbeat stumbled. You're offering me a division head position, she said. And the authority to rebuild the department properly. Without lies. Without egos. Without men like Russell. It was everything I had worked for at Stratton Core. Everything Russell had dangled over me, then ripped away. Everything he had feared I might accomplish, now being handed to me on a silver, sharpened platter. I exhaled slowly. Let's end him, Nora said quietly. The room went still. For the first time since the firing, I allowed myself to smile, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the calm satisfaction of justice aligning itself like pieces in a drawn-out chess game. Tell me what you need, I said. And the war began. Russell Dane always started his mornings with ceremony. Coffee first, imported, overpriced, roasted to match his ego. Then a quick glance in the mirror, as if reassuring himself that the world still obeyed his reflection. But on this particular morning, ceremony shattered the moment he stepped out of his penthouse elevator. 3 executives were waiting for him. Not greeting him. Not smiling. Waiting. Russell, said Minerva Clark, Stratton Corp's CFO, her voice brittle with pressure. We have a situation. He blinked slowly, annoyed at the disruption. What kind of situation? The catastrophic kind, she said. Highland Dynamics has suspended the merger. Russell stopped walking. Suspended? Why? Nora and it gets worse. She handed him a tablet. Read. The headline hit him like a punch. Federal Compliance Office investigates Stratton Corp for systemic violations, potential legal exposure. Severe. He felt heat creep up his neck. Where did this come from? Who submitted the findings? Minerva swallowed. Your name is on all the falsified reports. What? Those were drafts. I told the team to, but Minerva didn't soften. Didn't blink. There were no drafts, she said quietly. The compliance officer confirmed everything. And Nora Helston has already made a statement. Russell's blood went cold. What statement? She said. Minerva read with a tense voice. Highland Dynamics cannot and will not merge with a company whose leadership knowingly misrepresents its compliance infrastructure. He stared at her. She used the words knowingly misrepresents? Yes. That wasn't criticism. That wasn't rejection. That was execution. Russell spun toward the elevator. Get my legal team. I need to talk to Highland. I need to salvage, but Minerva stepped in front of him. You have another problem, she said firmly. The board wants to meet. Immediately. Russell froze mid-step. Why? It was Dean Patel, normally soft-spoken, who answered, because they think you lied to them. And that you fired the only person who could have prevented this. Russell felt the world tilt. Fired. The only person. Prevented this. His eyes narrowed dangerously. That rat, he whispered. He did this. He sabotaged the merger. Minerva folded her arms. Did he falsify documents? Did he hide violations? Did he fire a key architect days before a multi-billion-dollar deal? Russell opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth, for the first time in his life, had cornered him. We need to go, Dean said. The board is waiting. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of the city, I sat across from Nora Helston in her private conference chamber, reading live updates as Stratton Corp collapsed in real time. Nora watched me carefully. How does it feel? She asked. I considered the question. Behind the thrill of justice, behind the adrenaline of having the truth finally weaponized, there was something more complex, something deeper. It feels, I said slowly, like balance. Nora nodded. Not revenge? No, I said. Revenge is emotional. This is correction. She smiled at that. A rare, approving smile, the kind powerful people give only to those they consider equals. Correction, she repeated. I like that. She turned her screen so I could see a live feed of Stratton Corp's stock price. A perfect downward curve, steep and merciless. He'll survive the scandal, Nora said. People like Russell always find a way to float. But he won't survive the board. She tapped the screen again, switching to a different feed, an internal leak, the boardroom camera. Not audio, but video. Russell marched into the room, posture stiff, jaw tight, surrounded by men and women who once hung on his every word. Now, their faces were stone. Cold. Unforgiving. He looked like a king walking into his own funeral. Let it happen, Nora whispered. There was no malice in her tone. Only inevitability. Inside the boardroom, Russell began with his usual bravado. Hands slicing the air. Excuses flowing like a broken faucet. It was a misunderstanding. The compliance reports were being updated. The merger is salvageable if we act quickly, but the board didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't believe. Finally, Minerva leaned forward. Russell, she said, we know the reports weren't a misunderstanding. We know you were warned about the violations months ago. And we know you fired the one person who could have fixed them. Russell's voice cracked. He's lying to you. He's trying to destroy me. But the board chair raised a single hand. We spoke to Highland Dynamics, she said. They informed us that he personally verified the timeline. That he documented your obstruction. That he was the one protecting the merger from your interference. Russell stared at her, stunned. No, he whispered. He wouldn't. He doesn't have the influence. He doesn't need influence, the chair said. He has truth. The room fell silent. And then, as gently as a blade sliding between ribs, she delivered the final blow. As of this moment, Russell Dane, you are removed as CEO of Stratton Corp. In Nora's office, I watched him collapse into the boardroom chair, breath shallow, body defeated. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just small. Like a man facing the reality he had built with his own hands. Nora turned to me. It's done, she said. I exhaled slowly, a weight sliding off my shoulders. Not relief. Not triumph. Just justice. The kind that doesn't come loudly, but lands like truth finally allowed to breathe. The moment Tyler forwarded that damning email to the board, the oxygen seemed to leave the room. One by one, the directors read it, silently, then again, slower this time. I watched their expressions tighten, their eyes narrowing at the realization that the man who fired me was not a sharp visionary but a reckless gambler who nearly cost them their biggest deal in decades. Tyler didn't need to raise his voice or dramatize anything. The truth did all the damage. Others on the call chimed in, department heads who had also been silenced or sidelined for questioning Victor's methods. Their statements weren't emotional, they were procedural, factual, and devastating. Evidence layered onto evidence, building a portrait of a CEO who operated like a tyrant and treated compliance like an optional guideline. By the time the call ended, Victor's silence had turned into visible panic. He kept opening his mouth to defend himself but couldn't form a complete sentence without contradicting some part of the record. The next 72 hours were the slow, inevitable collapse of Victor's empire. The board launched an internal audit with a major consulting firm, and within a day, they uncovered inconsistencies in his expense reports, private meetings with rival companies, and unauthorized changes to projected earnings, changes that would have put the entire corporation under SEC scrutiny if the merger had gone through. The same people who once nodded at his every word now refused to speak to him unless legal counsel was present. His name was wiped from the leadership page before the week ended. Without a public explanation, the company issued a statement thanking him for his service and announcing a change in strategic direction. But internally, everybody knew Victor wasn't just fired. He was finished. The man who dragged me out with 2 security guards was escorted out himself through the back entrance, avoiding the press waiting outside. His downfall wasn't loud. It was surgical, cold, and meticulously documented. The merger, freed from Victor's sabotage, resumed within weeks. The acquiring company reached out to me personally, asking if I'd consider returning to oversee the transition as a consultant. I didn't say yes immediately. I let them sit with the request, the same way I had sat in the lobby after being fired, replaying everything in my head. When I did accept, it was on my terms: flexible hours, director-level autonomy, and a compensation package that made Victor's old salary look modest. Walking into the building again didn't feel like revenge. It felt like reclaiming a space that was supposed to be my professional legacy, one he tried and failed to steal. But the moment that truly closed the chapter came during a quiet afternoon in my old conference room. A junior analyst knocked on the door, holding a binder. "I heard what happened," he said, unsure if he should continue. "Just wanted to say, thanks. If you hadn't done what you did, we'd all be paying for Victor's mess for years." He wasn't dramatic about it. He just nodded and left. That validation, simple and honest, meant more than any victory announcement. In the end, Victor didn't just fire me, he exposed himself. His downfall wasn't because I orchestrated some vengeful scheme. It was because integrity has a way of outlasting arrogance. And when all the lies collapsed, all I had to do was stand back and let the truth finish the job. In the months that followed, life settled into a quieter rhythm, one built on dignity, not desperation. I wasn't driven by revenge anymore, I was driven by clarity. The merger closed successfully, the company stabilized, and the leadership culture shifted in a direction Victor would have never allowed. My role eventually expanded, not because I lobbied for power, but because people trusted me. Trusted my judgment. Trusted my work. Trusted the honesty that Victor once saw as a threat. Victor, meanwhile, faded from the corporate world with remarkable speed. News articles speculated about his disappearance, about the CEO who left abruptly just before a major merger's revival. Those who knew the truth didn't bother correcting the public narrative. There was no need. His legacy became a cautionary tale whispered quietly in meeting rooms: don't be another Victor. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in signatures, in boardroom votes, in the gentle shifting of influence and trust. His downfall wasn't a spectacle I celebrated. It was simply the natural end of a man who believed he was untouchable. One evening, as I left the office, my office now, I paused by the glass doors. The city glowed beneath me, alive with possibility. I thought back to the day he fired me, the humiliation he tried to brand onto my future, and I realized something: he hadn't destroyed me. He had revealed me. To myself, to the board, to the people who mattered. And in revealing me, he revealed himself. Walking into the elevator, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply felt a deep, steady sense of closure. Because the greatest revenge wasn't his downfall. It was my rise. Not fueled by anger, but by the undeniable, unstoppable truth.